Hello, my friends. Welcome once again to Kardec Radio and Spiritism, a closer look. And as you know, we do this every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Luiz Lima here, broadcasting tonight from Orlando, Florida. And tonight, we are going to take a closer look at the price of anger. This could be found some very interesting information actually in the Gospel according to Spiritism on chapter 9. There's a section talking about anger from, of course, the Spiritist point of view. Anger can be triggered by several different events and things. We are not really getting into this because we're not really interested in this part. We're interested in how to deal with it. But just as a reference, it could usually what triggers or the study of what triggers anger is divided in like three possibilities, three triggers: external ones, internal, and cognitive. External have to do with physical safety, physical discomfort, stress factors, loud sounds and traffic, things like this. Another one, hunger. So it's all external, perceived disrespect or feeling misunderstood, something along those lines. Those are external triggers. Internal triggers have to do with the person, just the person themselves. And it would be something like a trauma, memories of something in the past, chronic fatigue of the body, hormonal imbalance is another one, violation of moral principles, violation of your belief system. All these things are internal triggers. And there's also what we call cognitive triggers. And those have to do with negative thought patterns that the person has, assuming always the worst in every situation. Person usually and very, very constantly actually misreads someone's intention, self criticism. Those are all cognitive triggers. That's just, a short list of things that trigger anger. So, what uh, the problem is, we carry anger along with us across time. So, let's say, for example, there was an event, say 20 years ago, where something happened and you became very angry at a situation, a person, a group of people. You just became very angry 20 years ago. So, what you do, what the brain does, is it takes a picture of that event. So now the brain has a snapshot of what happened on that day. That snapshot includes not only the image or the situation itself, but also the memory of what you felt like, your emotions at the time. So if you became very angry on that day, on this picture, on this snapshot that was taken 20 years ago, you carry the same amount of anger. The problem is, 20 years later, you are still looking, or we are still looking at that snapshot. And now it's out of context because things change. We have changed. The other people, the other person, the situation, the circumstances, they all have changed. So we should be able to acknowledge all of this and discard the snapshot. So we don't carry that feeling of being angry on that day at that time for that reason. But we don't do that. We have a tremendous hard time letting go. That would be a sort of a letting go. Yeah, that's 20 years in the past. Forget about it, done. No, we don't. It's difficult. Something difficult, especially when the amount of emotion involved at the time is intense. So for these intense situations, we have a very difficult time letting go. So we carry these things with us. And if we don't detach, we are still living that event on that day, the day that it took place. So we create these, I could say, emotional shackles that are still attached to us, and they prevent us from smoothly going ahead and progressing. So it costs us a lot being angry. And the cost of anger changes when you no longer live on that day. If you stop living on that day, you know, anger doesn't mean the same thing anymore. It wouldn't maybe even wouldn't apply because that was 20 years ago. It doesn't really matter anymore. It could be, depends on the situation and the circumstance. But the problem is if we report back to that day, if we keep logging back into that event every day, or I'm not going to say every day, but in a regular basis, we are still living all of that. So we are kind of stuck in the past. So we should not, we cannot, it's in our own favor. We should not be looking at this photograph anymore, at this snapshot. Because if we do, we are going to script our entire life around this unresolved case. It's something, it's a shackle that, you know, keeps us, prevents us from doing something different. And so our life becomes scripted. It's the same thing every day or every week or every couple of weeks, depends on how often I go back and I report back to that day. So we are free to deliver our own future. But if we keep reporting back to the past, it becomes really challenging. You see, we cannot undo the actions and the events that took place some time ago. What we can do is reinterpret them, put them back into the new context because everything is different now. And that's where forgiveness comes in place. That's when I'm going to detach these shackles, overcome all this thing that I've been living with. It's free will. I might not want to do it, but we should. We cannot go back and change, but we can reinterpret. Oh, yeah, that was done because of this and this and this. It really doesn't apply anymore because things are different. So being angry is basically, being angry all the time is basically a cry for help. You're stuck and you can't get out of something. It's like you fell into a hole in the street or something, and you're asking for help because you can't come up by yourself. It's the same thing. We keep going back to the past and reporting back to that day, to that event, whatever it was. And it costs us a lot. We pay a very high price for this thing. How do we deal with these circumstances, situations like this? In the Gospel according to Spiritism, there's a very interesting message brought by Spirit Lacordaire. He says, suffer well. He says, you should suffer well. What is exactly suffer well? Well, I don't want to suffer. Well, what it means is you have to suffer because some wrongdoing was or took place in the past. So you're going to have to offset one way or another. So that will most likely create suffering. We don't have to suffer, but for most of us, it generates some sort of suffering at some degree, depends. So what it says is use that situation when you are suffering because of this thing, use that well, wisely. The word well here means wisely. So suffer wisely. Suffering is taking place right now. Okay, so I need to go through this thing, but I never want to go through this again. What should I do? How can I do? How can I act? What should I, get out of this situation so it doesn't happen again? That is suffer wisely. So the locations that could lead to anger and the situations that could lead to that anger that we keep going back, they have to be reinterpreted, redefined. And, you know, for example, death of a loved one, loss of a loved one. We can reinterpret that differently than the usual. Instead of course, I'm not saying we're not going to have, we're not going to be happy about it. Of course, there's suffering in there. We're going to be sad for a few days or so, longer for some people, shorter for others. But there will be some hard times in there in the beginning. So what we need to do is suffer wisely. While I'm suffering that, I have to comprehend. I have to understand why this is happening, and it doesn't happen all. It doesn't happen only to me. Everyone loses loved ones. So that's where Spiritism makes a difference because it will explain to us things that will make us read a second layer of things in life. So we get to the point where we make stepping stones out of these sufferings that we go through all the time. We make stepping stones out of situations where I got angry because I don't want to be angry anymore. So it's too high of a price. We don't want to pay that price. Each person suffers what he or she thinks they deserve. It's free will. So I suffer while I want to suffer. When I don't want to suffer anymore, that's it, done. There is no divine decree or anything like this that stops me from suffering. So we create our life based on things that we look into the past and we have these bad feelings about it. So we suffer all the time. So life, basically, we could say, on a second level, we could say that life is the context that we create to become a better version of ourselves. I want to be a better version of myself. Yes. I want to leave this life better than when I came in, and so on. And so does everyone. So all of us, we should live up to what we can be instead of living up to what we are. We should live in the eye of this hurricane where around us everything seems to be complicated, difficult, wrong. Instead of being angry all the time, let's just live in the eye of the hurricane. Life around us does not define who we are. We define life ourselves. Famous saying, wherever you go, there you are. In the words of Allan Kardec, we take our hell or heaven with us wherever we go. It's all on us. So we should leave anger behind. Being angry causes crisis and bursts. And one of the things that this, as a consequence, it blurs the intellect. It shadows reasoning. So at the peak of being angry, we're not thinking, we're not reasonable people anymore. And the worst is angry or anger greatly affects our health. It will create diseases, illnesses, symptoms. Anger doesn't give meaning to life. Anger is always in the past. There is no anger in the future. For example, if you say something like this, I'm going to be angry at Joe tomorrow at the party. It doesn't make sense because Joe might not even go to the party. So you can't be angry on something that never happened. You might be thinking that this is a future reference, but no, you're referring to Joe because something happened between you and Joe, happened past between you and Joe, and you carried the shackle. So your prediction is, oh, this is going to happen again. Anger is always in the past, always. And anger is almost always related to wounded pride. Pride feeds anger. Whatever you're feeling, sometimes you might be feeling contradicted, and you feel hurt on your pride. So now your pride is all wounded, and you react with anger. So at the peak of being angry, the person might attack everything and everyone, including inanimate objects. So you throw objects on the floor and you are mad at the object. Here's a simple example. Let's say you're just walking and you hit with your feet, you hit the sofa, for example. And for some reason that we're not getting into here, you become so angry, so aggravated that you start spanking the sofa or whatever, the chair, the table. So at that point, we could say easily, we lost the ability to think. It blurred the intellect and shadowed reasoning. So throwing things, at other people in the air. And even more, if pride is the reason for anger, it will be a lot worse having to deal with the aftermath. Because you were angry for some reason, and because of that reason, you became even more angry than what you were. And now it's gone, it passed, you're back to, being in control of your intellect, your emotions, your reasoning, and that's the aftermath. And now we're going to have to face everyone, see everybody. And if the problem is wounded pride, where's your pride stand now? Isn't it going to be a lot worse? So this whole thing generates a progressive cycle that could be increased intensely as you go along. Being angry, generating pride, because of pride that makes you even more angry, and so on and so on and so on and so on. To a point where people can look at those who are extremely angry, totally lost, and they become an object of pity because nobody around them can do anything. They are, the intellect is not there, reason is not there. So what can you do? You have to wait for the person to, quotes, please come back. That's the only thing you can do. So this person, while the whole ordeal is taking place, it becomes an object of pity. Maybe later on you're going to be able to help and do something, but while the event is taking place, we can't do anything. Anger makes the angry person the primary victim of the situation. So a person might get angry because somebody else is doing something, but the somebody else is not the victim. The primary victim is the person, it's himself, herself. So I said, this is a cry for help. And it's a cry for help because there's a point where these people, they're not able to ask for help due to their pride. So the way for asking for help is to do this, to be angry, throwing things at people and so on and so on and so on. It's a desperate cry for help. And also, by being this way, they make everybody around them unhappy. They produce a turmoil in the psychosphere of the environment. So they will blame it on their temperament, their body, their hormones, or whatever, and ultimately God, when it's not. It's not what it is. But they do that. They blame it on anybody else or anything else. I like one saying that is in this chapter 9 that I referred in the beginning, Gospel According to Spiritism. It's a message received mediumistically by a protector spirit. And this is what this spirit says. I'm going to read it to you, so I don't put my 10 cents on it. I'm going to read it so you get it as is. Quotes, anger does not exclude certain qualities of the heart, but it keeps one person, it keeps one from practicing much good and can lead to practicing much evil. End quote. So the person, when it's really angry, at the peak of being angry during an event, they will practice evil, much evil, instead of practicing much good. And that's not good. There are consequences. Practicing doing evil, performing evil, at one point, it's a wrongdoing, of course, so at one point, it's going to have to be offset. There will be consequences. And also, on this chapter, there's a message by another spirit, Spirit Hanman. Hanman is the father of homeopathy. So he delivers this message, which I'm just going to summarize really quick. And it's also on this chapter 9 of the Gospel According to Spiritism. He says more or less like this. There is always room for improvement, moral improvement. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a thing such as law of progress. So the law of progress ties into the ability to improve. Otherwise, it makes no sense. So there's always room for improvement. Now, each one of us, we can remain on that state because of our free will. There is no direct obligation on, improving. Because we have free will, we can choose not to. It's a choice. Not a good choice, but it's a choice. And finally, he says, those who want to correct themselves always can. Those who want to correct themselves always can. So, the idea of blaming on your genes, being angry because you're blaming on your genes, your father and mother, your physical body, hormones, and so those are excuses. Anger is a thing of the spirit. And again, there's always room for improvement. Those who want to correct themselves always can. So thank you very much for joining us today. I always like to refer to and at least say something about KardecFlix.com, which is a new platform. You're invited to check it out on your browser. It's a new platform. It's full of resources, spiritist resources. You have movies, interviews, books, and content for all ages. It's a great tool. It's a great resource. So check it out. It's a new platform. It's worth checking it out. Thank you very much for joining us today. And again, we do Spiritism, a closer look right here on Kardec Radio every Wednesday at 7 p.m. So we'll see you next time.